On today's episode of the McCann Dogs Podcast,
read your dog. If you have a dog that's afraid and quiet, I'm going to pay the extra money to send them to a different type of facility. If I have a dog that thinks it's fun to bark and run around, then you know what? Maybe they'll be fine there.
The McCann Dogs Podcast is brought to you by McCann Professional Dog Trainers. We help dog owners to have a well-behaved, four-legged family member. And now, Instructor Shannon.
Welcome back to the McCann Dogs Podcast. It is season 4, and today we need to talk about vacation planning because I'm in the studio here with Instructor Swanny, and outside right now, it is gorgeous.
Exactly. We have unseasonably warm temperatures, and it's put us in a good mood.
It has. So next week, it's supposed to go down to normal seasonal temperatures again, but I am really excited about the fact that we are on the cusp of nicer weather. We're on the cusp of like spring becoming summer and everything being nice and warm. So we thought this was a good time to sit down and have a chat about vacation planning.
Exactly. Yes. And if anyone wants to help us, plan a vacation with us, we're more than willing. Yes.
Absolutely. And then the nicer places, of course, the better. I like lakes. I like woods and lakes. Swanny, what do you like?
I like ocean. I like forest.
There you go.
Yeah. What's the difference between the woods and the forest?
I don't know. You can't see the forest for the trees, though.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
That's true. I think forest.
Expanse, maybe?
I don't know. Forest sounds more, I don't know, more
official.
I don't know. Yes.
I'm not sure.
Yes. But I'd rather go to the forest than the woods.
Oh, the woods are dark and deep. Maybe that's why. All right. So we're going to talk about vacation planning as it pertains to our dogs rather than just as it pertains to Swanny and I and our likes.
Oh, I thought it was good.
Darn it. So Hawaii, all those nice places.
Yes.
No. So vacation comes with some stress sometimes for dog owners. If you are bringing your dog with you on vacation, there's some planning that needs to be done. And if you are leaving your dog somewhere safe while you're on vacation, there's some planning that needs to be done. So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to talk about some of those things. So when we go to Hawaii, what are we doing with our dogs? All right. So first off, if we have a young dog that is still in training, there's probably going to be more things that we need to consider than if we have a dog that is well established and well trained and, they've lived with us for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. But let's talk about, first off, going on a vacation where we get to bring our dogs along with us, which is usually what happens with us. Typically, our vacations are planned around dog events anyway.
Exactly,
so.
yes.
Although I do have the occasional dog vacation that is at a cottage where we just unwind and enjoy swimming, and I swim just as avidly as the tollers do. So what about you?
Well, I don't know if I'm as good a swimmer as the tollers.
I'm not as good as them. I love it as much as they do, but I'm definitely not as good as them.
I love swimming. I love being in the water.
Yeah, perfect. And we were talking about Honda likes to paddle around a little bit too.
Right, yes. My Chinese crested powder puff. He's getting older, but he does like to float around. And
perfect.
Yes.
So much fun. So fun. So if we are going to a cottage, for example, with our dogs, tell me what your packing list is.
Well, if I'm taking my dogs, my packing list is suddenly doubled.
Yeah, pretty much.
The dogs, you need a lot of things.
You do.
Especially if you're renting a cottage, it's not yours. You need to ensure that the cottage is left just as pristine as you found it.
That is a fact.
Yes, because you don't want to ruin it.
No, and you don't want a bad rating on Airbnb. So
right, yes. So you're looking at things like your crate. You're looking at all your dog's toys, all your dog's food, all your dog's bowls, all their bedding. If there's water involved, maybe a young dog, you're bringing a life jacket.
Yeah.
Extra towels, so you're not using all the cottage's towels. So you can dry your dog.
Yeah, I didn't have towels on my list. That's a good one. That is a good one, because especially if the cottage is a nice cottage and they have nice towels and you have muddy, wet dogs.
Exactly, yes.
That's maybe not a nice thing to leave for people. So I want to talk about the food thing for a second, because I think a lot of times people expect that they can get places and just get a bag of food at that place.
Right.
And of course, our dogs get used to eating the same thing. And when we go away on vacation, it's probably not the right time to switch up their food. So you really are best to plan ahead and bring food with you rather than hoping that you'll be able to find the right brand of food where you go. I actually take that one step further, and I will consider bringing water along for my dog as well.
Yes, I always do too. My dogs drink distilled water.
Okay.
So it makes it easy for me because I can just go to the store and buy a whole bunch of jugs of distilled to bring with me. Yes.
Yeah, that's a great idea too. I think that a lot of the times it's not necessarily top of mind for us that different areas will have different mineral values, et cetera, in the water. And sometimes that can throw dog systems off a little bit as well, especially if they're pretty much homebody dogs that drink at home and then don't necessarily drink out and about. Whereas, the tollers are always drinking out of puddles and things like that. So they're usually pretty bomb proof. But I also still, if I'm going quite a distance, I will consider bringing my own water along with so that even if they're drinking a little bit from the lake, they're not getting the majority of their water from a different source or from different bacteria, et cetera. Food, definitely. I like to be well planned with food. And I actually feed a combination of raw and kibble, not at the same time, but I will bounce around through different protein sources, et cetera. So my dogs are usually pretty well versed in being able to go from one type of protein to another type of protein, but I still like to make sure that I'm well planned when it comes to bringing those things along with me on vacation.
Right, yes. One time when I went to the Bermuda dog shows with my corgi Iggy, we got to Bermuda and I had packed all her food in baggies, individual baggies for every meal.
That's
and then
good planning.
Then I used the baggie for cleanup too. So so it worked out well.
Planning.
But I was so excited about being in Bermuda, I somehow left all the food within reach of Iggy, and I ran to the beach, and Iggy ate all of her dog food in like, in a couple of hours. That was supposed to be all week. And so I'm in Bermuda, and, so I had to end up taking a cab into the town. And of course, I could not find the dog food brand that Iggy ate. So I had to buy another brand, and it all turned out well.
Good.
But so another thing is keep your food away from your dogs and supervise. Once again, I learned the hard way, but
the things we learn in our youth.
Right. Yes. Because I would have been 21.
Okay.
I would have been 21 when that, because actually I combined the Bermuda dog shows with my honeymoon. It was also my honeymoon.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That's a great way to plan your honeymoon.
Yes.
Throw a dog show in at the same time.
Bring your dog on your honeymoon and compete in the dog shows and have a honeymoon at the same time.
This is crazy dog people sort of thing for sure. But that's great. I love that. So water, food, toys. I definitely will bring along toys with my dog. I love the idea of bringing towels, crate.
Yep, definite crate, maybe even 2 crates.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. So once you have a dog that is well crate trained, there are fabric crates that you can buy that are so easy, so easy. Not something I would ever use with a dog that wasn't well established with crate training yet, but once they know to go in their crate and just relax and they're not likely to try to, break their way out of it, etc. Those crates are so handy. They're so light. They fold down usually or collapse down in some way. They're so easy for portability, etc. And it's just nice to have an area, especially I find at a cottage. I like to have a couple of options in terms of the areas that my dog can dry off in.
Yes.
So that I'm not like, of course, my tollers are always allowed on the couches and on the beds, etc. Right. So a wet, dirty toller jumping on somebody's bed and shaking doesn't make for a nice situation. So I always make sure that there's either an area outside that I can set up an X pen, or I will often bring some sort of a barrier. And actually my old car crates had a barrier that would pull out of the middle, and I would use that. I would unscrew it, pull it out, and I would use that to like block deck entrances and things like that, so that I could sit on the deck, relax and read a book and not worry about watching the dog too closely and know that they would still be safe as they dried off in the sun.
Right, yes.
So things like that are really, really handy. X pens, etc.
I've even brought tie outs, and I've never left them unattended, but if I want to sit somewhere under a tree, then I can tie out the dog and I can keep an eye on them while I read my book, and they're just wandering around in the grass having fun.
Perfect. And I like that you said supervised, of course.
Yes.
So tell me why you would make sure that you're closely supervising on a tie out.
Well, on a tie out, the dog can easily get tangled. The dog can easily charge out to the end after a squirrel and hurt themselves. They can dig. They can get into all kinds of mischief on a tie out. So to me, a tie out means supervising, but
Me
it
too.
does give the dog a little bit of freedom. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I like that we touched on that there too. A couple of other things thinking about the car ride. If you are somebody who has your dog in the car a lot of times, then it won't be anything that's new or novel for them. But if you generally have a homebody dog that you take for walks and only go for car rides when they need to go to the vet, etc., you'll want to consider the fact that this will be a longer car ride probably than usual. So you'll want to plan for that as well. I like to have my dogs crated in the car, especially for long rides where, if I'm getting on the highway, I want to make sure that my dogs are as safe as possible. And having a loose dog in the car becomes a very big danger in the event of an accident. Even just a small fender bender, the dog becomes a projectile in the vehicle and can become, a danger to the humans in the vehicle. Obviously, it can be very unsafe for themselves as well. If you can't fit a crate in the vehicle, which maybe if you're packing for a cottage vacation with your family and all of that, you might not be able to fit a whole crate in the vehicle for the dog to hang out in, but consider some sort of a restraint system, safety seatbelts, that sort of thing. And think about the idea that with the safety seatbelts especially, there's a little bit of training that comes along with that. So it's not something that you want to put on for the first time and then go for a 3-hour car ride, because I guarantee you your dog will be tangled up in that thing faster than you can imagine. So spend some time with training in the car, making sure that they know how to relax and making sure that they know how to be calm and not necessarily try to tie themselves up in that seatbelt and in that situation.
Yeah. And plan, you're going to be doing some extra stopping to let the dog out. I always make sure
Stopping for plopping.
Yes. I always make sure that my dog's leash is handy. I don't want to have to be, looking for the leash. So the leash is handy. I have water bowls handy. I have
good thinking.
The water supply handy. Everything is right there for the dog when I need it. So I'm not spending extra time digging through my luggage.
Perfect. So smart. I love that idea of having the water handy too. One other thing I always like to recommend for people if they're going somewhere outside of their normal area is take a little bit of time before you go and research where you're going to find a vet clinic, where you're going to find an emergency vet clinic, just in case. You know, hopefully this is something that becomes wasted time researching where this vet clinic will be. But if you need a vet clinic in an emergency situation in an area that you have not been to before, the last thing you want to be doing is trying to find one that will see your dog when they've not been a previous client, etc. When there's an emergency situation going on, you want to know where you're headed to if something goes wrong with anything. I also will bring a first aid kit.
First aid kit.
Just some basics, some peroxide, just in case.
When tick removers.
Tick removers, great idea. When Ned was a puppy, actually, we rented a cottage with my family, and of course, Ned is 100% my responsibility. It should be me watching him. I shouldn't be expecting any of the family members to watch him. And there was a moment where we were all just sort of hanging about and cleaning up after dinner. And so plates were being emptied into this little garbage can, and we had corn on the cob. And Ned was wandering around, and I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have been. That was bad. I should have crated him for those moments when I wasn't able to focus 100%, but live and learn, and mistakes happen and all that. And he went to the garbage can where the corn cob pieces were. And when I looked over, he was just like chomping away on a corn cob, which, if you may or may not know, or people may or may not know, that corn cobs are a really big cause of blockages.
Yes.
So having that emergency first aid kit meant I had peroxide, where I was able to very quickly just douse him with some peroxide, where he threw up the pieces of corn cob, and I felt so much safer after the fact, because of course I was concerned that it might cause a blockage and pose a problem for him. And then I was reminded for the, those humbling moments when you have a puppy and you realize that you made a mistake and did not supervise closely enough. And of course, nothing like that happened again because I was much more diligent, but it was good to have that peroxide there.
And on vacation, you're often distracted, and you often have people, relatives who aren't dog people, and they think nothing of putting their plate down, with chicken on it or chicken bones.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened in that scenario. They were just, scraping their plates into the garbage, left the lid up, and didn't think twice about the fact that there was tempting corn cobs there. So
I remember my brother once putting his hamburger on the ground on the plate, and And then all of a sudden him exclaiming, oh, somebody ate my hamburger. And, it was
Did any of the family members cop to that?
No, it was definitely Cowboy, the Saluki, who had stolen it. And, but, he's like, I said, oh, Paul, why would you do that? And he's like, I don't have a dog. I never thought that a dog would come and steal my hamburger. Like, it's like, yeah. But, my fault, too. Cowboy was an adult dog, and she didn't get into mischief, but a hamburger on the ground was...
Of course.
Yeah, it's like...
Well, it looks like dinner.
Yeah, finders, keepers, losers, weepers.
Absolutely. She made out like a bandit.
Right, yes.
She was the cowboy.
Another thing, too, I just thought of.
Yes.
Always have identification tags on your dogs.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes.
That's a good one.
When you're traveling and when you're at the cottage, yes.
Yeah, and I actually, I like to have the embroidered collars. I have my dog's name and phone number embroidered into the collar just in case a tag ever got caught and got pulled off. Microchip is a good backup for that as well.
Right.
And, having multiple forms of ID on your dog is not going to be a waste at all. GPS units, navigation units are often a good idea.
Right, Instructor Carol uses those with her dogs. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually been thinking long and hard lately about getting one of those myself, even though I'm usually really, really good for making sure that I have tabs on my dogs all the time. And it's not something that I'm overly concerned about, but the inkling of a thought in the back of my head that, if a gate ever broke open or like systems fail, things happen, you just never know. So having that navigation in place.
Or both of us have old elderly deaf dogs.
Yes.
If a deaf dog gets loose, you can't call it back and they wander off. Having a GPS on an elderly dog would be a good thing. Yes.
Hey, Swanny, guess what this weekend is?
What?
Reggie's 15th birthday.
Oh my goodness.
He's so sweet and old and wonderful at this point. And he's going to be 15 on Sunday. So knock on wood, of course. You never know. Every day is a gift at this point. Do you have anything
special planned for him?
Well, I'm definitely going to take some goofy pictures of him in funny looking hats so that we can commemorate the event. And he is the final living toller out of his litter. So I have to, of course, share some love of him with his breeders. So I'll make some sort of a video and send that along to his breeders so that they had kept a sibling from Reggie's litter and they lost her a couple of years ago. So I, like I said, every day is a gift. And I'm so glad to be saying happy almost 15th birthday to Reggie. 15, and, life willing, on Sunday, we will celebrate that a little bit bigger.
Oh, nice.
And one of the things that I know has helped me get to that 15th birthday is I am super diligent about checking for mouse poison when I get to a cottage.
Oh, yes.
Super diligent.
Yes, good. Very good point. Yes.
I actually, in my correspondence with anybody when I'm doing an Airbnb, I let them know that I'm bringing dogs and I make sure that it's a dog-friendly cottage, et cetera. And I ask ahead of time, can you just let me know if you've put out any mouse poison this year? And if so, where you expect that to be? And then even though I ask that question and I get an answer and I trust people, I still do my own check to make sure as well. And I make sure that when I get to these new spaces or cottages that I don't let my dogs just wander and investigate in corners until...
And under beds.
Exactly. Until we've settled in and I have done those checks for poison and anything else that might be around as well.
Yes. Especially if you're the first person, say, to come to the cottage after it's been closed down for the winter. You don't know what's happened over the winter.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the times with Airbnbs, they will have services come in and do the cleaning, etc. So even if they didn't necessarily put down poison, somebody else might have thought, oh, you know what, it's going to be a good thing for me to put a tray of poison under the sink or something of that nature. And we owned a cottage for many, many years, sold it, a decade ago or so. But I understand the need for the poisons and whatnot. So it's always top of mind. Always.
Right. Yes.
Anything else that you think about when you're heading to have a party vacation at a cottage or somewhere where you're bringing your dog?
It's a lot of planning. It's far more planning when you bring your dog. You might find that you want to go on a day trip when you're at the cottage. Well, is your dog welcome to come on the day trip? Yeah. Can you leave the dog the whole day in the cottage? Is there other cottages nearby and the dog might bark? So it does maybe give a bit of restrictions on your trip.
Definitely. Definitely. Good things to think about. And the other thing I really like to mention is the water toxicity factor.
Oh,
and
yes.
the fact that our dogs go from being at home nice and chill to now being on vacation and having all this activity, a lot of the times they'll overdo it and exhaust themselves. So we want to be careful with that. I always force breaks with the tollers, especially.
Yeah.
Ned is such a water dog that he could literally swim for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and still be enjoying himself and still want to do more. So I have to force breaks with my tollers a lot. I make sure that, I watch a clock. I make sure that, 20 minutes, half an hour of swimming is a lot of swimming. And with some of my tollers, they've been big water drinkers as they've swam. And water toxicity has been a concern because that is definitely something that can happen if they drink too much water or if they're drinking the wrong kind of water.
Right.
So we want to, we always want to be err on the side of caution and just take the time to force breaks, have someplace safe that you can put the dog up for a little rest.
Shady spot if you're on a beach.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
And then everybody can have fun the whole time and there's not going to be any accidents.
And you want to check too for the blue-green algae blooms.
Yes.
Which are more prevalent now than they used to be, which
Yeah,
is toxic to
unfortunately.
dogs. Yes. You don't want them in there.
Yeah, if you're in like a smaller pond system or something like that, if you're close to farming lands and whatnot, it is agricultural runoff that creates some of that. So yeah, that's definitely a good thing to warn people about.
And to be aware of wildlife too. If your city dog
that's
might,
a good one.
Suddenly be encountering porcupines. There might be deer. There, of course, there's always skunks and raccoons.
Yes.
Foxes. There might be far more wildlife that you have to, guard against.
Yeah. Well, and even things like mushrooms.
Yes.
In different areas of the world, there's mushrooms that are
Right.
toxic. So you want to make sure that you have a good look around in any of the new spaces and that, for the first little while, you're keeping really, really close tabs on everything that your dog does just to see what their new habits or their new investigations are going to bring them to and to make sure that they're safe.
Right.
And then, of course, have a good time.
Yes. Yes.
all of these watch out warnings are certainly very important, but we also want to make sure that we get some downtime and some enjoyment on our vacation, and so do our dogs.
Not to be afraid of using your crate too.
Yes, absolutely.
You don't have crate guilt. Your dog
That's a
needs
good one.
to spend time in your crate. You're on a family vacation. You want to spend time with your family too. So if you want to go down to the beach and not have to watch the dog and want to focus on some family fun, leave the dog in the crate in the cottage.
Yeah. Well, and even with a young dog, forcing those breaks and forcing some naps so that they don't continue to get into overstimulation mode and you don't end up with these fluctuations in their energy level and their behavior level. You can try to keep some semblance of normalcy in their routine. If you've got a young dog that's still in training, especially, that'll help.
If you're planning on taking a road trip with your dog this summer, please go to the McCann Dog Training YouTube channel to watch our Travel Safety for Dogs video. The link is in the description below.
Now, the other end of the coin, if you're the other side of the coin, the other side of the coin. If you decide that you are going to go on vacation without your dog and you are going to leave them behind, obviously you need to have a safe place that you trust to leave them for that vacation. So I want to talk a little bit about kennel setups and in-house pet sitting. What kind of experience do you have with leaving your dogs behind when you need to?
Well, throughout the years, I've left my dogs in lots of different setups. I've left them at traditional boarding kennels. I've left them with somewhat in between where the dogs, instead of being confined to kennels all the time, get to go out into fenced fields. And I've left my dogs with friends and family.
Okay.
So I think I've experienced the gamut of it.
Yeah, that's a good word. I like it.
I don't think I've ever used it before.
I know. It's a good one.
Word of the day now.
There we
Gamut.
go. The word of the day calendar that's going to come out thanks to the McCann Dogs podcast. The first day will be gamut.
Gamut. Use gamut as much as you can today.
All right. So let's talk about leaving them with friends and family. What are some of the things that you tell your friends and family?
Well, friends and family are good, but they can also not be good.
Yes.
So it has to be someone that you trust and someone with a good setup, because sometimes family says, you know what, I'll just do it the way I did it with my dog, and that doesn't work for your dog. So it has to be a family member that you trust and is going to continue with your rules. And is going to look after them like you would look after them.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of mischief they can get into, or a lot of detrimental things. Say, I don't bring my dogs to dog parks. I wouldn't want to leave my dogs with my friends who suddenly go, let's take them to the dog park.
The dog park will be fun.
Oh, yes. So be very careful.
Yeah. And if you're wondering about the dog park angle and why we wouldn't want our dogs going to the dog park, we have done podcasts and there's blogs and there's all sorts of information on some of the dangers that come along with dog parks and some of the reasons that they're probably not the best use of your time and the best place to take your dog in most cases. So you can certainly look up some of those details as well to help make your decision about dog parks. But I love that point, because I would want to be very clear with anybody I was leaving my dogs with. I would want to make sure that I left them very clear instructions. Obviously I'm grateful that they're helping me out and taking care of my dogs, but I also want to make sure that my dogs are safe.
Yes.
And they're well managed and they're not in situations where they're going to pose dangers to themselves or to anybody else. I'm going to leave very clear instructions. I'm going to make sure that I'm clear that even though my dogs are very well trained and they're very responsive to me off leash, I would not want them to be let off leash with strange people. Right. Not strange people, but even family members. Well, strange people definitely.
I've met your family. Yeah.
It's a fact. There's no denying it. It's a fact. I come by it honestly. I would want to make sure that they understood that, especially my well-trained dogs that I've built extreme relationship with, and they love me and I love them, and we're constantly looking to each other for, communication. Right. If my dog is let off leash and they think they need to come and look for me somewhere and they're not responsive to that person, like that worries me. In familiar spaces, especially if they're thinking like, oh, well, last time I saw Shannon was over here, so I'm going to take off over here. I don't ever want to take those chances. So I would always say, unless it's a fully fenced safe yard or inside the house, leash on, please, so that there's no chance for any danger.
Yes. I know one of my friends who has a kennel. She has a huge field to let the dogs run in, and it's well fenced, but she always puts a long line on them. It's a second backup. Yeah. Yes. And I like that. It's that 20-foot long lines dragging. Plus, they're in a great big 6-foot fenced area. I feel very safe with that.
Good.
And I might even do like a trial weekend with them.
Yes.
Because my friend might say, oh, I'd love to take your dog. And then, my friend goes, I don't like this. It's not what I thought it was going to be. I'm not enjoying myself. So I want to make sure that they're happy too with my dog.
Yes, absolutely. And that they're not going to just give them away to somebody that comes by knocking on the door after 2 days because it's not what they thought they were signing on for.
Or put them in a boarding kennel. Yes. And then pretend that they did look after them.
Oh my goodness. I can't even imagine. So we can break things down a little bit, I think, to leaving them with friends and family, leaving them with an in-house pet sitter at your house, at somebody else's house, leaving them in a kennel situation. There's a whole bunch of different setups. And what would you consider to be the determining factor of whether you're leaving your dog with like an in-house pet sitter, for example, versus a kennel setup?
Well, in-house, I'm not that comfortable with someone staying in my house. Now, some people are, but I would feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. I tend to send my dogs to trusted kennels.
Yes.
And I'm extremely picky.
I don't blame you one bit. I'm the same.
Like I'm beyond picky. So I start to, like right now I have two kennels that I absolutely adore, and either, I could send my dog to either of them, but I just wouldn't pick a kennel off the internet, and I go and visit. I talk to the people. I need to feel comfortable.
Perfect. What are some of the things you're asking them about?
Well, I don't want my dogs playing with other dogs randomly, and a lot of kennels will, let a group of dogs out, and for some dogs it works wonderfully.
Yep.
I just don't want my dogs exposed to that.
I am absolutely the same. I want to be the one picking my dog's playmates. I want to be the one supervising, and I want to be the one monitoring as well, so that if there's something that I know is different for my dog than what they're usually about, I want to be able to have the option of stopping that play. So I could not agree more. Definitely a great question to ask is, how is my dog going to be exercised during this time? Like, what do you guys do an individual? I would always pay for individual walks if that was the case, so that I wasn't just relying on group play with other dogs. I think that's a really important thing. And I think that brings us to the topic of cage-free boarding, which is sort of a new buzz thing in our culture, where people think that this is a great thing. And especially with a dog who is used to a quiet life, it can actually be their worst nightmare.
Yes, very stressful.
Yeah, for sure. So even if you are going to a kennel situation where the exercise is to be let out with groups of other dogs to play, you want your dog to be able to have downtime. If your dog simply is stuck in this overwhelming situation all of the time, where they never get an opportunity to turn off, and every time they try to find a quiet corner to relax and lie down in and have some peace and quiet, there's a young lab puppy coming and jumping on them, etc. That is a really hard position for that dog to be in. So I would really strongly encourage everybody to think about, being at a party 24/7 and never being able to get away from that party, and how overwhelming that might be. And there are some dogs that absolutely, they're so social and they love to play that it's not really anything negative for them. But even those dogs, it's still, they need to have downtime. They need to have rest.
And they're rehearsing behaviors that maybe we don't want them to rehearse.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would strongly recommend questioning the idea that cage-free boarding is the right setup for your dog. Consider your dog, consider what they usually like to do, and, consider what their days are like on a normal basis. And if most of the time their days consist of them laying on the couch while you're at work, they might not adjust well to a boarding situation where it's a cage-free situation. Things to ask about before you go into a kennel situation. What kind of vaccinations are they looking for? How long do those vaccinations have to have been given before you're able to board them? If you have a female that comes into season, are they going to be willing to take your dog? Or we did an episode a few episodes ago about spaying and neutering and the benefits and the drawbacks and whatnot. So that's something to consider as well.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And cleanliness.
Yes.
You want to make sure it's clean. You want to make sure their staff is knowledgeable.
Yes, absolutely.
When I was a teenager, I worked at boarding kennels, and there is luckily I'd grown up in the dog show world, so I was I was familiar with what a sick dog looked like, what an injured dog looked like, how to handle dogs that are stressed out, how to handle an aggressive dog, just how to interact. So even we had a dog. We didn't have roofs on some of the kennels, and we had a dog climb out.
Oh my goodness!
And was loose running about, and I trudged, it was in the winter, and I trudged through the snow, and it was a whippet. And, I finally got a hold of that dog, and, had to carry it back. And, you're looking that the staff is good.
Yes.
And knowledgeable. Absolutely. And yes, can recognize when there's an issue, and will give your dog that little bit of extra attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really, really good points. And this is another situation where I would do a trial run first.
Yes, always do a trial run.
Absolutely. If I'm going away for a 2-week vacation, that's not the first time I want my dog to be exposed to that kennel, because then, if 3 days in, they're really having a hard time, they still have a long time to have to weather. And, if I've got a planned vacation and I've just flown to Hawaii and my dog's in a kennel here, well, am I going to jump on a plane and fly back to get them out? Am I going to try to get a family member to go and pick them up to get them out of there? Like, what is the solution for that scenario? So I'd much rather know going in, okay, this is going to be the right fit for my dog. I trust the staff. I know that the staff likes my dog. I know that my dog likes the staff, and I know that, they're going to follow my rules and everything is going to be fine. So I might have them spend an overnight at that kennel before I commit to the 2-week period, etc. But after having asked all of these questions about making sure that my dog's going to be safe, making sure that they're going to get exercised in the way that I want them to be exercised, and not just, let loose and it potentially unsupervised with a bunch of playing dogs.
Right.
You know, that's another question that I would ask. You know, if there are play sessions, who's supervising them? How many people? What is this setup like? Give me a tour of your facility. I want to see where my dog's going to be.
Right.
I want to see where they're going to sleep. I want to see where they're going to be, be playing, etc. I want to make sure that the areas that they're going to toilet are clean areas.
And every day they're picked up many times a day. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that there's no weird debris hanging around. There's nothing my dog's going to eat, etc.
Or injure themselves, like, you know, like pointy pieces of metal or you know, wire fencing or Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And also one thing that I don't like to leave my dogs, if I see the employees are all wearing hearing protection, then you know what? That's too loud for my dog too.
Probably.
Yes, because there's some kennels that are just bark, and I just don't want to subject my dogs to that. So I'm very picky about leaving my dogs in a loud environment. Now, I've had dogs that have been very gregarious and have thought the barking environment is the funniest fun thing they've ever been in. But the dogs I have presently would not do well in that. So, you know, read your dog. If you have a dog that's afraid and quiet, I'm going to pay the extra money to send them to a different type of facility. If I have a dog that thinks it's fun to bark and run around, then you know what? Maybe they'll be fine there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. Some dogs need more special care.
It's true.
If you have an elderly dog. And the people have to give medicine to the dog or a young puppy.
That's a good one.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's something, definitely anything that's medically related that the kennel staff or the sitter should know about your dog, make sure they know that. Make sure they've got your emergency contact information. Right. All of those things are so important. Yes. And we want to make sure that we also let them know, I don't mind being disturbed. If you have a question about me or if you have a question about my dog, I don't mind. We've had so many stories where people have said, you know, they didn't bother to even call me. Like, I want to know if there's anything, if there's anything so that I can help you make the decision that I know will be right for my dog. Yes. So, you know, if he's got a little bit of diarrhea, for example, like I want to know about that. Right. I want to know if he's feeling stressed. I want to know any of the things that might complicate.
Yes. And I always let them know too, if you feel my dog needs to get to the vet immediately, just take him and go.
Yeah.
Like, just go. I'd rather that he goes. I will reimburse you.
Yeah. And a good point to make on that is to contact your vet. Yes. And tell your vet, I'm leaving my dog in the care of this kennel staff.
Yes.
And if they need anything, please make sure that, and you might even leave a credit card with the vet or something of that nature. But a lot of the times vets will be at a loss to be able to treat your dog from a different person. And, you know, they might not know whether or not you'll approve those charges, et cetera. And we don't want any barriers there.
Right.
So we want to make sure that there's instructions in place for the vet to be able to contact you. The vet has your your emergency contact information so that you can clear and you can say, yes, absolutely 100%. Here's my credit card number. I will pay for it. And I have authorized this person to care for my dog right now. I think that's a great thing to preemptively make sure that your vet is aware.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Well, aside from that, I hope we all have really, really wonderful vacations. Actually, I was just thinking about an in-house pet sitting story. I wrote a blog post on finding the right, it was on the convenience of the pet app. So basically it was one of these, like an Uber service where you went on, I can't even remember what the name of it was. So I don't want to guess just in case I name the wrong thing. But basically it was one of those services like Uber where you go on and you are presented with a whole bunch of people who are advertising through this app and you pick your pet sitter and you put them in place and life is great, supposedly. But this story that I had read, and the first time I had read about any experience with one of these apps, was about a pair of dogs. It was actually a trio of dogs that were being cared for by the people that were hired through this app service. And the neighbor called the people on vacation because the dogs were on the balcony barking like for hours and hours at a time. And one of the dogs actually ended up, I think, stuck in the railing and choked, like really awful situation. Yes. So what had happened is these people that had been hired from this app, the blog post I wrote was called The Cost of Convenience. It's coming back to me now. The people that were hired to take care of these dogs through this app had stolen the people's vehicle. left the dogs on the balcony, and we're gone.
And oh my goodness.
So
yes.
your gut to not have somebody come and stay in your house
Right.
falls along those lines as
Right,
well.
yes.
You know, make sure that those people are well vetted. Make sure
Right.
that you have gotten references.
Yes.
That's another
Yes.
thing. We wouldn't hesitate to ask for references in situations like that. And with anything dog related, you know, breeders and kennels and vets and all these things, you can ask for references.
Right. Groomers and yes.
Exactly. And see not just what other people think of the service, but that there have been successful services
Yes.
before. You're not going to end up in a situation
Right.
where you come home and your car's gone or your house has been,
Right. Or-
ransacked and your dogs
Yeah.
are in despair.
Yes, they've neglected your dogs. Yes. So
Mhm.
the cheapest is not always the best.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and you don't want to just, someone who's like, oh yeah, I got a fenced yard, I'll take your dog.
Yeah.
Like, who knows? Like,
Yeah.
like dogs can, if they're not watching them, like, dogs can, eat anything. They can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this has been a good educational episode. So I hope that everybody has wonderful holidays this year, wonderful vacations.
I'm heading to Myrtle Beach.
Excellent. That will be
not
so
for another
nice.
month though. Yes.
Yeah, you have to weather a bit more cold weather as our seasonal temperatures return, and
Right.
then we'll be off to our vacation spot.
Yes.
Happy vacationing,
Happy
everybody.
vacations.
On that note, I'm Instructor Shannon.
I'm Instructor Swanny.
Happy training.
This episode was brought to you by McCann Dogs Life Skills 1, where your dog will learn to come when called, walk nicely on a leash, ignore distractions, listen and respond to your voice commands quickly and happily, and stop jumping up on family and guests. Join us in person or online. For more information, please visit McCannDogs.com. Happy training!